Go ahead, hon.
Today is what? Today is
27.
Tuesday, the 26th. And tomorrow is our triplets' birthday. So that's how I know it's the 26th of July. And the year is 2005.
Okay. And you are?
82.
We're not really sure yet.
I'm 82. And he is 86.
And your names, please.
My name is Ann Finkelstein.
I'm Norman.
And we're going to start by asking you to, as far back, each of you individually, as far back as you can go with what you know about your family. The oldest person you can remember when you were little. Take us back as far as you can.
My father and mother, and her father and mother. I don't
Well,
remember my grandmother. Ann may remember
I
hers.
remember my grandfather. I do. He died on my 6th birthday, so I do remember him. But not. The only thing I do remember is I cried, "Why can't I have my birthday party?" And I was told, "Your grandfather just died." Well, I didn't know what the hell died meant. Oh, I shouldn't talk.
That's all right. It's not a.
I had no idea what died meant, and I just kept on crying. I wanted my birthday, but of course I didn't get it.
And she's still crying for the same reason.
Remember his name or how he made a living or anything about it?
Yes, his name was Jacob, and he came from the old country, and I think when he came from Europe, he had no trade, and he lived with one of my aunts. So I don't really know what his trade was. I think he wasn't working, truly.
And go into your parents now.
Oh, my mother and father. My father died when he was 51, excuse me, when he was 51. And my mother died when she was 76.
And tell me about them and what it was like growing up with them.
Well, growing up with them, I remember as a child, my mother was tough. My father spoiled me. Anything that my mother wanted to do, he'd say, "Let it be." And I loved that because I always played one against the other, and I remember that very well. Other than that, when he died at 51, we were just married, weren't we, when Daddy, when he died?
Yeah, not too far after. I think I had come back from the service.
Yeah, so I didn't have a really chance as an adult to have a good time with him. And my mother, she was fine. She had her own home. She lived in West Philadelphia. And then one day her wonderful son-in-law used to stop and see her all the time on the way home from work. He stopped to see his girlfriend. So he said to her one day, the colored people, I shouldn't say that.
Don't put that in.
No,
Wipe that out.
the neighborhood was starting to change. And we were kind of worried about her. And Norman said to her one night when he visited her, he said, "How about coming to live with us? We have an extra bedroom." Didn't ask me, he asked her. And she thought about it, and she agreed. I think it was the worst thing that we could have done because we took away her independence. She lived in the suburbs with us. She wasn't near the trolley car or the buses. She lived at 60th and Spruce. And my aunt lived down the corner, her sister. So every day they went to Horn and Artist for breakfast. And they shopped on 60th Street in all the stores. And then when she moved out in the suburbs, no stores and no restaurants close by. So anyhow, she lived with me. And then we moved here. She didn't want to move here, so she took a little apartment in Overbrook Park. And for a very short time, she passed away. And that's...
Do you have siblings?
Yes. I have a brother who just passed away.
His name?
Jack. He's named after my grandfather. I
You wanted
miss
to
him.
tell them about how I bought you your first pair of shoes.
Well, before we get into
No, he's joking about it. No, my brother, we were very close, and I do miss him. It's about a year, isn't it, Norm?
Well, at least.
Yeah, he's He was a sweet guy. He was wonderful. He used to try to come to see me. He lived in Cherry Hill. And he used to try to come out here once a week, once every 2 weeks. In the winter, he was away at Florida and called religiously to see how we were. So he took sick about a year ago and suddenly passed away. My younger brother, he was 7 years younger than myself. When he was a kid, he was a pest. Oh, God, I wanted to kill him so many times. But then when he got older, we were real good friends. And that's, when we were little, we used to battle. I was really a pest to him because when he was 7, I was dating. Not dating, no, when he was 9. I was 16, so I started to date. A few times Norman wanted to wring his neck because he was a kid. Other than that, we had a nice childhood. We had our ups and downs, and I guess my parents did too. But how about you?
Hey, you got to tell them the most important part of your life is when you married me. Why you leave
That's
that
right.
out?
No, I didn't get up to that.
Oh,
I didn't get up to that.
Well, she come up today pretty well.
Yeah, so.
Did you grow up Jewish, Lee?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. My mother had a kosher house, and she kept 2 sets of dishes and 2 sets of pots and 2 sets of towels, and we had milk dick and flesh dick. And my mother had
dairy and meat.
That's dairy and meat. And my mother had an aunt that lived in New York. A lot of her family, beside her sisters and brothers, they all lived close by. And her aunt that lived in New York came to visit one time. Well, Aunt Adela was the matriarch of the family. And she came to our house and she says, "Golda, what are you, crazy? You're in America. What's with the 2 sets of dishes?" I'll never forget that. I was a little girl when she said that to her. What's with the 2 sets of dishes and the 2 sets of pots and everything? You're in America. Do like the Americans do. Tell Adela, I can't buy the tray for me. All right, so don't buy the tray for me, but you don't have to have 2 sets of everything. And from that day, my mother stopped. There was no more kosher, only the meat. Kosher, she had to have the kosher meat. And my aunts and uncles, they all lived close by, and every Saturday, we, as little children, we'd get together, and all the cousins played together like our children do now. Our children, all the cousins are very close. And we did. We grew up to a certain age, and then all of a sudden, everybody started to go their own separate ways. One had a little bit more than the other. One was a little jealous of the other. We got older. But before that, every Saturday we would get together at one of my aunt's house. She lived on a little tiny street in South Philadelphia, because my parents' business was in South Philadelphia. And a little tiny house. I don't think her whole house was as big as this room.
Remember the name of the street?
Oh.
12 of Mars.
No. Where Aunt Sarah and Uncle Herman lived. I know the name, but
Give any kind of name, don't make it.
Yeah,
Fountain Street.
I think it's Reese Street. That I kind of remember. I think it's Reese Street.
Deep in South Philly.
Yes.
What kind of business did your parents have?
My parents had an ice cream parlor and like a luncheonette. They worked like dogs. My father went to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. My mother opened up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And they worked very hard. And
what was the name of it?
it was just
No
Lou,
name.
no name. My father's name was Lou, and everybody knew Lou. And I think when he died, half the street owed him money from what I got. The picture that if anybody needed anything, they asked him and he gave them the money, loaned it to them. But I mean, that's the story that we got afterwards. My mother knew nothing about it. And my mother sold the store. My brother was only 16 at the time, and it was too hard. We were married. and we had a child. And my mother decided she couldn't keep the business by herself, so she sold. I think you have to wait a year or something at those days. And she waited a year and sold the business and then moved to West Philadelphia. We at that time lived in Derby.
Okay.
And,
Well, before we get into together, Norman, how about your family? How far
Man, you
back?
want a history, you better spend 2 hours with me. Good Lord. I go all the way back to remembering pre-Depression and before 1929 when President Hoover was our president. And I was born in 1918, and at that time my father was in the scrap business, and I used to work for him after school. But my parents came from Russia, and my father came over first, and he worked as a stevedore in New York, and he sent from Mom after he started to make a living. Then they bought a delicatessen store in New York. They ran that for a while and then came to Philadelphia. And Pop opened the scrap business with an uncle of mine, with Isaac Gindis, and they stayed together for a while. And then Isaac Gindis went to Morristown, New Jersey, and opened up a men's clothing store, a haberdashery store they called it at the time. And I was born and raised really in the scrap business. And we lived in West Philadelphia. I had a good childhood. I worked for my father. We had a car every time that's one thing we had. We used to go to Atlantic City on weekend trips, taking the ferry over the river.
I don't even know if you know of that. They used to have a ferry. You'd put the car on the ferry and go.
Yeah, and ride over to Camden.
And
And
that
from
was
Camden, drive down to
big
Atlantic City
deal.
with the Black Horse Park. There was no such thing as expressways then.
You smelled the water, and it smelled so good.
And we went through hard times. I remember 1929 when my father lost everything in the bank, and he wanted to take his life, and my brother took a gun away from him. And we had to close the business for 2 or 3 years because there was nothing to do. But my mother was a dressmaker and a shirt maker in Russia, and she held the family together and supplied the food and stuff with working as a dressmaker and seamstress till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and kept us going. We had a rather large home, old home. The home must have been 100 years old, with a large porch all around. I used to do all the painting and all the woodwork and all the chopping of the wood for our coal stove, and putting the coal in the bin when it poured out of the truck. First it was horses and wagons, and they would come in with the coal and would drop it in the shuttle, and I would have to shovel it into the bin because one of my brothers was going to college. I had 2 brothers and a sister. One was 10 years older, one was 8 years older, and one was 6 years older. That was Jack, Herman, and Rose. And eventually they left our home on their own way, went on their own way, and I stayed with Mom and Pop. And all I wanted to do was play ball, which I did. And I think I've been watching the Phillies and the Philadelphia Athletics for about 76 years, and they're still giving me a pain in the ass. And
Tell them when you told your mother you wanted to go to school.
oh, and my mother wanted to know if I wanted to go to college, and I said yes if I could play ball. And she said, I can't afford to send you to college to play ball. So I didn't go to college. I graduated Overbrook High School in 1936. And my first job was for the Donnelly Circular Corporation at 25 cents an hour. And I got sick of that. After about a month, had to get up 5 o'clock in the morning and work till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And one snowy day, it was cold as hell out there. I just threw the circulars over the bridge on the railroad and quit.
Hard.
I went home and I worked for my father for a while. And then I reached the ripe old age of 20, and I met Ann. and we went together for about 3 years, and I gave her an engagement ring.
About 2 years it was.
Okay, and of course